everyone, my name is Cormay, and I'm going to give you guys some commentary on a 25 Underrot we tested last week with the affixes quaking, teeming, fortified. So the first pull that we like to do in Underrot is this maggot you see right here, that patrolling matron, and the 4-pack that's on the center circle there. It's like the headhunters and the priestesses. So this pack is pretty scary. A lot of groups will opt to just pull the maggot and matron together, or CC the maggot and shroud the matron, and just pull those 4 headhunters alone. However, we think that it's pretty valuable if we can pull this pull off, and if someone dies, they can release right there. And usually this pull gets to melt with Lust. So I normally end cap the first maggot spew and then leg sweep the second, and then if I need help with the third, then I'll call for help. As far as that matron goes, it's definitely the scariest mob in this pack. It's really important that you're using your CDs like Fort Brew and Dampen proactively, because this pull's not going to last that long and you don't really need them anywhere else. As far as the matron like killing people through that, even if you have a CD up, that can happen if it like syncs up with the barb spear and stuff like that. Normally, like if you have a mage and stuff like that, they have like barrier on and they get to live. So if you want to make sure you're CCing hook snares as soon as the matron charge is about to go out, and if you see someone that's stuck in a net, you can Tiger's Lust them and that will free them from the net. Okay, so next thing we do is these ticks. So these ticks put a nasty dot on your tank and they explode when they die. So it's really important that you put a darkness down and you hope and pray that the darkness saves the people, but it doesn't always save everyone, as our rogue went down there. Something that you can do there as well is you can have your rogue just go in and parry tank those ticks, and that way they don't get any bleeds. It's pretty efficient, and I think we're going to start doing that as well. So after the ticks, we go into the fear obelisk. So again, it's really important as a Mistweaver that you try and save your revival so you can dispel all those fears as soon as you get in here. So something unfortunate happens here. I think me and the tank and I get the next set of fears, and I'm going to dispel the tank here when that happens, and he's going to try and kite. I'm going to put a ring down so he can kite, and I'm going to get feared, and he's going to die during that. Looking back at this, I think I maybe should have had him berserk and dispelled myself so I could try and heal him. I was trying to save him from taking damage from the fear, but I don't think he was going to take very much damage since he had Spell Reflect up. So it's probably a misplay on my part. But since we're in Underrot, our tank just released and he's coming back and he's going to get the mob back. So after this, we're just going to drag Samrek into Leeaxa. I'm going to go ahead and skip this, it's going to be pretty boring. As far as Leeaxa herself goes, as a healer, there's not really much for you to do. The only thing you really want to look out for as a monk, as soon as the ad spawns, make sure you're also hitting the ad so that you put Mystic Touch on there. Yeah, other than that, there's not a lot of healing unless your group is being Pega with kicks. So we're just also going to go ahead and skip this part. Okay, so the next pull we like to do is a pull that you should probably only do with the Mistweaver, or unless you have 2 disease spells in your group. So we're pulling in 5 lashers. So we have 4 kicks, but one of those kicks can't solo one of the lashers. So the first set of decaying minds that goes out, 4 of them are going to get kicked, and then one of them is not, and I'm going to dispel it. And then there's going to be another set here, and that's where 2 of them are going to come out. So sometimes they're synced up and both go out and you just revival them off. Or sometimes they aren't synced up and you dispel the first one and you revival the second, because you don't want to have any of your DPS sitting. You don't want to sit there and wait for the second one to go out to dispel, because then that DPS who's stunned might miss a kick, and it's really hard to communicate in those like 0.5 seconds where you need to get that kick. So just make sure you dispel, then revival. Even if you're missing a global, it's not really a big deal. So yeah, we're just going to DPS down these 5 lashers. It's pretty efficient to do it this way. That way you're not limited by pulling mobs later with less kicks, because a lot of groups actually opt to just have to pull the 3 lashers by themselves and then maybe pull like a maggot with it, and then pull the other 2 lashers like the rots that are on the other side of this pillar. So yeah, just dispel that. Okay, so the next pull we're going to set up for is the rots on the other side, a bunch of other rots, I think like 1 maggot, and then we're always going to be pulling 1 swarmer into whatever pull we're doing, and as soon as the swarmer dies, we're going to chain it another, because we want to make sure we don't ever have to double pull a swarmer, and we're always cleaving it down with something. So as a Mistweaver, you don't have too much you can do about the swarmer. So Rest is basically just get to like solo hibernate them, which is really powerful. But if you're a Mistweaver, you can't do that. So what is really helpful is if you're running with a warrior and they run the Conflict and Strife essence, then their Thunderclap is always rooting the Bloodswarmer. That makes it so it can't really go in like charge whoever it's targeting or get in melee range of them. It also kind of tends to bug out the Swarmer where it stops fixating sometimes. I don't fully understand it, but I do know it's really awesome, and you should have your warrior do it if they have that available. Something to note about kiting the Swarmer, so you want to make sure you're doing something called dead zoning it, which is where you don't want to be in range for it to melee you, but you don't want to go further than I think it's about 15 yards from the Swarmer, because then it will charge you. And that's what you're in trouble. A big mistake I see people do is like they see the Swarmer target them and they try and get as far away as possible, which is the last thing you want to do, because when it charges, that's when it's going to do the most damage to you. Yeah, so you see our rogue has it on him, so he's like cloaking, but you can see like it keeps moving a little bit forward and it keeps getting stopped by that thunderclap root. So as we do this pull, we finish off the Swarmer. I'm gonna get a drink, and we're gonna start the next pull. I think we do this room in about 4 to 5 pulls usually. Yeah, so this is one of our, like, this is like a much smaller pull. It's kind of like a reset pull, and also because it has the Swarmer, a Lasher, and a Maggot, we're already kind of capped on how big we can go. Those are usually the limiting factors on your pull inside of Underrot, because you only have so many stops and kicks. So basically you just want to keep DPSing down. I'm going to skip this part because it's a little bit slow. So we can get to the next pull. Alright, so yeah, we kill that finally. That pull kind of takes a while because we don't have any CDs for it, and then we kind of gear up for a bigger pull. So we get here, so we're going to see our mage combust the Swarmer, and then after that Swarmer dies, we're going to chain in the next Swarmer. Again, make sure you're helping out and watching the Maggot if your DPS are going to need any help with that. Also make sure if you're up on that hill where the mage is, that you're being really careful to look for the green circles on you, because sometimes they, like, the reticle kind of goes into the ground and you can only see like the outer edges of it. And that's an easy way for you to die to that. I guess we have another Swarmer. Okay, again, so also you can ring the Swarmer, but you have to be pretty exact with how you do it. You have to stay exactly in the center. You have to stay exactly in the center of the ring when you do it. If you try to move back, it'll charge over the ring, or it'll go around and it'll kind of melee you. It'll only work if you stay exactly in the center. So it's kind of sketchy a bit when you do this, because if you're just like trying to rely on it and trying to just plan it, because if something spawns under you, you're kind of screwed and you gotta move and you're gonna get meleeed. Other than that, yeah, just making sure that you're staying just out of range of it, but not going so far that it'll try and charge you when it gets the chance. Something else to note, so if you have like a rogue, so the Swarmer does nature and physical damage, so if they want to be completely immune to all the damage, they need to cloak and they need to riposte. Okay, so next, so we're gonna pull these bombs over here, and we're gonna pull them, and then once we got here, we realized we're like, wait, we should be pulling these 4 by themselves. We should be pulling them with the skeletons. So really what we should have done, if you want to be efficient, you should pull the skeletons first and then drag them over, because they're much faster, whereas these mobs are really slow to move, and it makes it kind of hard for us to drag them over and get the pull together. But yeah, we were just kind of sitting here, we were deciding what to do. We usually have routes before, but we also just kind of YOLO it sometimes on how we want to do it based on how our CDs are lining up. That happens a lot, especially when you're going up a key level, because your CD timings change. And right now our mage has combust and he's deciding, oh yeah, he's fonting right now. So that means we're going to delay pulling the boss another 2 minutes. So yeah, so we're dragging all of this into the skeletons. And then I think we're going to drag all of this into the worm. Oh yeah, so something to note, so when you get to these skeletons, so the Death Speaker casts something called Wicked Frenzy, and Wicked Frenzy puts a enrage buff on any of the other mobs. It's not the Death Speaker itself, and when that mob hits your tank, it puts a really nasty dot on your tank. So normally if you have a Soothe, as soon as that goes out, and it's a warrior of course, you let them spell reflect the first tick of it, and then you soothe it. However, if you're a Mistweaver and you don't have a hunter in the group and you don't have a soothe, what you try and do is you try and lock down that mob so it doesn't cast Wicked Frenzy. If it does cast Wicked Frenzy, and you have a warrior, you let them spell reflect. If not, you just make sure they don't get hit by it. You try and ring a piece them, tell them to get away. If they get hit by it, you dispel it. But if they get hit again and you don't have a dispel for it, it's pretty deadly on your tank. So you want to try and prevent that as much as possible. So again, just CPSing this down. I think next we don't have combust back yet, and we want to combust unless at the beginning of Cragmaw, so we're gonna go ahead and do this obelisk. Again, there's nothing really special about this obelisk, especially since there's not really any cysts that you spawn in on. Thankfully, this is one of the nicer spawn locations for this, so probably just gonna go ahead and skip this for us. We don't really want to watch this. Alright, so we're going to engage Cragmaw. Okay, so I want to go over a bit about the choices I made in this dungeon, because most of the choices that you make as a healer in this dungeon are about Cragmaw, because it's basically the only scary part in this whole dungeon as a healer. So usually in this dungeon and like dungeons like a Talazar or dungeons where I like running Well of Existence, and that's because there's high like burst damage phases, and then there's phases in between where there's not a lot of healing, where you get to store up a lot of well healing. So I always make sure I'm wearing well in this dungeon. I also like to wear usually an on-use trinket because it kind of works as an extra CD for one of the tantrums. So you don't have a lot of like CDs like other classes do, like you don't have like Aura Mastery or Trink or anything like that. You usually just have a lot of cons of throughput, and then you can, of course, you use your TFT for Secret Infusion every time you get a tantrum. Something else to note, this is another boss where you can't, even though I'm running Way of the Crane, I really only use Way of the Crane during the down phases for damage. But other than that, what we usually do is, when the first tantrum goes out, I usually just call for personals. So like, the Rogue blurs, the Mage does their blink shield thing, and then your Rogue, of course, is always going to faint. And you should be running Fort Brew and Dampen Harm, and then you should Fort Brew the first one, Dampen Harm the second one. I think Fort Brew comes up again for the third one, but I'm not exactly sure. And then, depending on how safe I'm feeling, I either use Thunder Focus T to proc Mastery, or I use Thunder Focus T to RS King get Versatility. I think both are really good, and it kind of depends on what you prefer. So yeah, we'll start the boss fight, sorry about that. So, usually the first one, we just do personals. Then the second one, I will usually use my trinket. And then the third one, we usually do rally. If I think we're gonna get a fourth one, then you take the first darkness. I mean, the first take a tantrum that goes out, you stand in darkness. But other than that, basically all you're doing is you're trying to make sure that you're getting Renewing Mist on your whole party. So notice that I'm using Renewing Mist on my party here before the tantrum goes out, only when it's going to stack the 2 charges, because I want to make sure that I have Renewing Mist on everyone right before the tantrum goes out. So I just put up my last charge of Renewing Mist there. Make sure, another common thing that I will see Mistweavers do is that they will choose to Soothing Mist someone. So it's really important here that you choose to just vivify different targets, depending on who needs it. And also that you use that time before. I think I put like enveloping on like the mage and the rogue or something like that. You can usually get a couple envelopings out before the tantrum starts as well. It's really not always that necessary though. I don't think I do it for everyone. I usually just do it for the first one because that's usually the one where I'm using the least. So then this next one, so I think we got breath and charge. So there's 2 kinds of like in between phases. So the boss can either charge first. If it charges first coming out of the tantrum, then you're gonna get a charge, then you're gonna get a breath, and you're gonna get another charge. And we call that a good phase because it's longer, so you get more time to just sit there and DPS the boss. But you can also just come out of the tantrum phase and just get a breath and a charge, and then you're gonna get you're kind of gonna get more tantrums, but basically you're just gonna have shorter phases of DPS in between the tantrums. This next one, okay, so you see I activate my trinket, and since I know that we're not going to get a fourth one based on the boss's health, we decided to use darkness on this one as well, and then we'll have Rallying Cry from the warrior on the next one. So there's a lot of classes that have like good Cs for this, like one of them is like VE. If you have a prop paladin or something like that, they can always bop someone during that phase. You can call for a mage's block, you can call, so my demon hunter chose Nether here. It's also kind of important that at the end of the phase that you go and help soak ticks as much as you can. Remember that when the tantrum is over, that there's no more healing to be done. The only person who's going to be taking damage for a long time is a tank, so don't just sit there and spend time topping everybody up when that's not really necessary. Make sure you're going out there and helping your group soak. If there's a lot of ticks that are left, just use a speed pot. You don't really need to pot yourself during this. You can use a second damage pot if you want, But I usually like to save it for a speed pot just in case, because if those ticks all spawn, it gets pretty nasty. So we're gonna get one more here, and he's going to use Rallying Cry. I'm just going to heal. Yeah, so I see quite a few ticks when I turn around, so I decided to speed pot, even though the boss is already almost dead. I just want to make sure that nothing bad happens here. Looking back at that though, we probably could have just let those spawn, and it wouldn't have mattered because the boss is going to die. Something else I do want to talk about with Cragmaw is that, so like I said, I was only using Way of the Crane during down phases. Something you could try, and I've tried on lower keys, and I haven't tried on a key quite this high yet, is you could speed pot and Way of the Crane. So the thing is, like, if you try and Tiger's Lust and Way of the Crane, the boss kind of jukes a lot, and he'll juke you so that you can't melee him. But if you speed pot, you can basically keep up with him. What you should do though, if you do this, is probably call for some immunities, because you're only going to be healing the 3 nearest targets, especially like your mage. Like, I'd probably tell my mage to block during that one. And what's kind of nice is that while you're going around with speed pot and Way of the Crane, is you can also do some soaking while you're doing that, and then like as soon as that is over, you can start soaking. So you can kind of take their place soaking, get some damage in, and while they stay in block. I can't completely condone it because I haven't done it on a high key. I think the highest key we did it on was like a 23 or a 24. But it is something that you could try if you want to do that. It also is probably a bit more efficient for damage because your mage isn't doing damage during Tantrum anyways. So yeah, so we're just killing skeletons. Again, nothing really special here. Honestly, a lot of Underrot trash is pretty easy, and it's just like the only thing that's really scary is like things that are one-shots, like swarmers and getting hit by corruptor tentacles, or taking a lot of the wicked frenzy dots, or not kicking the defiler. So you actually get to do quite a lot of damage in this dungeon. If it weren't for Cragmaw, I'm pretty sure healers would only pretty much break Twilight Depth in this dungeon. So yeah, so we're just gonna finish this off. We did the right skeleton pack, and as soon as that death speaker died, we pulled in the other side. So since this is teeming, we have this extra death speaker here. Something nice you can do here is you can just pair it, and then we pull the 2 defilers by themselves, and then we pull the death speaker into Spore Color Xantia. These defilers, nothing too crazy for you to do. If they mess up kicks, you can use Ring of Peace to try and help out. I don't think para works on these mobs. So yeah, all you can really do if your DPS with a kick is just try to para to help out. Make sure you're dodging those spirit drain totems. I've definitely died those a couple times, and taking the time to go and give those a special warning sound so I don't die them anymore. So you pull the death speaker in. If you're pulling death speaker into Xantia, make sure you're still getting kicks on it. Otherwise, it'll summon those reanimated guards. So something nice about being a Mistweaver on this fight is you do have disease dispel. So there's a couple ways that you can deal with your group not being very good at soaking mushrooms. The biggest one is revival. It's pretty common for us. Normally when we get here, the first set, they usually try and get all the mushrooms, but it's kind of hard, and so I usually just end up revivaling it. What that means is, as soon as he does his volatile big AoE, sorry, the name is escaping me right now, and you see all the dots go on your party members before it does its first tick, then you get to revival. What's really important is when the AoE is going out, make sure you hit a defensive. Yeah, it's called Festering Harvest. I wasn't even close. So you see that I hit Fort Brew, and the reason you want to do that is because if you accidentally get hit by a spore, sometimes those things will just sneak up on you. As soon as he does that, the amount of ticks you get, so we're going to get 4 stacks here. So they'll all tick at once and you'll instantly die. So it's really important that you have a defensive in case that happens, and if you die when you're about to revival all those things off, your whole party is going to die. So I always make sure that I use a defensive here. You don't really have anywhere else to use it, so you might as well. So I do that, and as you saw, we got all the stacks and I revivaled them off. So after that, if your group isn't very good at soaking mushrooms, most classes do have an immunity they can use. So you can use Rogue Cloak. Our Demon Hunter can go Nether Walk them. Actually, I don't think Nether Walk stops the application. I think you still have to dispel them after that. And your mage can try and zoom through and then block them off if you want to do that as well. But again, if you see that there's going to be some mushrooms that are left over, you can just go soak them, dispel them. Often a lot of tanks will be like, oh, I'm going to soak these next two, will you dispel me on these? And that's really good as well to make sure that you're always getting these cleared. So yeah, you saw my tank left over there, got that one mushroom stack, I dispelled him, and then I'm going to eat two myself, and I'm going to dispel myself. Yeah, it's okay, so we'll skip the rest of this fight. It's pretty boring. Alright, so we're gearing up for our next pull. Normally after Xantia, we Shroud. You can either go around and do this worm and then pull this, because you're going to pull all this anyways, and then save Shroud to go to the last boss. Or you don't even need Shroud, honestly. You can just skip past that. So normally we do these 5 skeletons, and then we're going to pull in a defiler, and then we're going to focus this defiler. And then after this defiler dies, it's teeming, so there's a worm over here, back here. Sorry, I changed my camera angle. Notice that my tank right now, he has the Wicked Frenzy dot, because we let a Wicked Frenzy go through, so I think he dispelled the first one. I'm going to dispel him, but he got another dot, so I think I'm going to ring him here. I hope I'm going to ring him. Yes, I'm going to ring him. That dot is pretty nasty, and you're going to have to pump your tank if they get that. So the defiler's almost dead. We also let the curse go through that makes you do less damage, so this pull is probably lasting a little bit longer than it usually does. So yeah, so now we're going to pull in the worm. And then eventually we're going to pull in one of these corruptors as well. Gonna keep chain pulling here. So the guardians are getting pretty low. I think they let a cast go through here if I remember. Yeah, I think when we went to get the corruptor, we let a cast go through, but you can just revival that. You should have revival backup by this time, and you have the corruptor. Corruptors are probably one of my least favorite mobs in the game. The tentacles that they spawn, it's really hard to tell where they're going to slam. It's pretty obnoxious. So I kind of wish we'd pull this corruptor in sooner, because now what's going to happen is we only have the corruptor and the worm up, and the problem with the worm is you can't move the worm, so when tentacles start spawning on the worm, it starts creating a lot of problems, because obviously you need to be in there killing the worm and kicking it. But I think we're trying to get him a little bit lower before we drag him on top of the worm that's right next to this spider obelisk we want. So if you see the man gaze going at your group like that, you can always ring it. But yeah, I would just suggest, I even almost got a little bit too close to those tentacles, that when you're against this mob, that you play a little bit skittish. That you're not being too aggressive, that you're being really careful, watching where those tentacles are going. It's also kind of hard to see where they're going sometimes when you have 2 melee DPS, in this case we have the Rogue and the Demon Hunter using the Lash of the Void weapon. Because whenever it procs on that corruptor, it looks like the same animation as the tentacles. So yeah, just make sure you're not getting hit by anything. So your group will make fun of you for dying to that mob. So next, I'm just skipping right here because it's pretty boring. We're just going to do Voidweaver Mouth here. Again, we use the Shroud to set up this 5 skeleton defiler pull. So we're going to drag Voidweaver Mouth here all the way to the other side. If you don't want to drag Voidweaver Mouth here and you don't have Shroud, something you can do is you can always just ring this corruptor when he's either on this side of this pat or on this side of this pat, and your whole group can kind of just walk this way or this way, doesn't matter, and not proxy pull any of the worms. You can also just pull that corruptor instead of the other corruptor that we pulled into the pull before. Alright, so we're going to finish DPSing down Voidweaver Mouth here. And then we're going to pull a really fun pull, which is the 2 corruptors, which I'm sure all of you guys are familiar with, and I'm sure you guys have never died to. So something you can try and do, which I try to do and I mess up. So if you see the 2 corruptors doing 2 different casts, there's a lot of tinfoil in the WoW community on how to try and sync up these corruptors to do the same cast. Because sometimes, like, one was doing Abyssal Reach, one was doing Maddening Gaze. And so I believe if you just interrupt one, then hopefully they'll sync up afterwards if you just kind of delay the cast of one. However, that only works if you only knock one of them. Unfortunately, I knocked both of them, so don't do that if you're trying to sync them up. Or you could just save ring for whenever there's like a bad maddening gaze at like your whole group or something. I'm definitely not a tinfoil expert on that, and I've only been successful with it when someone else has told me when to do it. So I'm definitely not a good source for that, but they're kind of synced. They're doing maddening at the same time. We'll take that as a win. It's really awful when they're doing like exact opposite abilities at the same time, especially the tentacles, because it makes it really hard to stack them and then move as a group. Yeah, I usually play pretty skittish on this pull, because I really don't want to die. Because then we have to waste the battle res on me, and it's not really worth. So I also want to talk about, so we did skip an obelisk. We skipped the obelisk. It's kind of like in the back left here. I think this week it's the ooze, but other weeks it is the fear. So I think no matter what week it is, we usually always skip it. A lot of groups, when it's the fear obelisk, they will choose to go out of their way, and it's like you have to kill like a worm and a defiler and a corruptor, and of course you're gonna have to use shroud if you want to get over there because it's in a really awful spot. I know it's like in a pathing that normally nobody goes. We normally, if we get the fear guy that's there though, we usually still pull it with the last boss just because I'm a Mistweaver and we can revival off the first set of fears, and the second set we usually have enough immunities, and then usually on the third fear, even if we get the debuff, it dies before those fears go off. So we were being a bit careful there because we were afraid we were gonna get quaking when we were going down, which can kill you, unfortunately. So next we're gonna do the last boss. He's a pretty simple boss. Only little scary part is that you have the blob here, and it makes it a bit hard to properly bait the Unbound Abomination Spit. But with a little bit of practice, it's actually pretty easy. So as a healer on this fight, there's not really like a lot of like big healing you have to do. Again, as long as everyone's staying in that cleansing light. If you see anyone that didn't stand in the cleansing light and get their stacks cleared, you can go ahead and just dispel them. It'll save yourself a lot of healing in the future. Yeah, you just focus on the blood of the corruptor. Make sure that right before the abomination is about to do his vile expulsion, that you guys are all behind him and baiting correctly. You want to make sure you're not baiting towards the wall. It's not completely understood what happens, but if you bait towards the wall, then somehow they like kind of like bounce off the wall, or they bounce behind the wall, and it'll make spores spawn directly on top of your group and instantly kill them. I think that happens to our demon hunter later in this fight. So our tank wasn't inside the clearing circle, so I just go ahead and dispel him there. The cleansing light. I'm bad at remembering names. So again, we bait Vile Expulsion, we move forward as a group. Make sure you get behind him again to get ready for the next Vile Expulsion. It's a pretty simple dance once your group gets it down. Only gets a little bit worse with Quaking and Volcanic. Okay, so something else I want to talk about is the only time this fight gets really scary, and you saw me revival there, is when those ads spawn. I'll actually back up for a second. So I didn't really need to revival here, but it's just kind of a habit. So when the Blood Visage spawns, you usually skip the Cleansing Light ability that this guy gives you because he's busy killing the little ad. And so sometimes during that time, that's when you see your group. So we got to 2 stacks and I cleansed it because I knew it was going to go to a 3 stack because we're going to skip that Cleansing Light. And I just want to save myself some healing. But the overlap actually wasn't too bad this time. We still got a pretty good cleansing light. We would have been at 3 stacks there, which is a little bit sketchy, and it's a fine time to use a revival. If you aren't a Mistweaver, I usually suggest that around that time you dispel your tank. But yeah, other than that, this fight is pretty easy damage, just when those ads spawn. Also, those ads, if your tank doesn't taunt them, can come up and melee you or one of your DPS, and it actually hurts quite a bit. So I'm probably just gonna go ahead and skip most of this because honestly this boss fight is pretty boring. I think we barely timed this key. We did have a couple of mess ups. I think some of our routing we talked about after this in like the Cragmaw room, and especially like after Spore Collar Zancha, we were talking about how we should have pulled in the Corruptor earlier and things like that could have been a lot better, but we still timed it. If you guys have any more questions, I'm always happy to answer more questions at my stream at twitch.tv/Korame on how I can help you guys better understand Mistweaver and high keys. And thank you all so much for watching.